Welcome to Private for Public, a deeper look at Maine's delicate and often complicated tradition of public access to private land. Brought to you by the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Hey everyone, this is episode 4 of Private for Public. I'm your host, Chris McCabe, and this week I'm talking with Matt Stedman, who is joining me from Ashland, Maine. Matt is the Northern Region Vice President of the Maine Snowmobile Association, as well as a forester with Revving Woodlands. Matt has additional insights into forest management and the dedication of snowmobile clubs to recreational access.
I'm a forester for Revving Woodlands. I've been with the company since 1999, so going on my 25th year here, based out of Ashland. I'm a planning forester, so my job is really to take our 80-year management plan and make that operational on the ground. So where are we going to go operate this year? Where are we building roads to access future tracts of forest? And then also mingling in with that the interactions with the public. So camp leases, ATV and snowmobile trails, hunting, all the public access that is allowed on our private property. So it's a full-time job and then some, but it keeps me interested and intrigued to be able to do that recreation interface as well, because I'm very passionate about that. As you said, the Northern Region Vice President for the Maine Snowmobile Association. Been in that role for 4 years, and been in the snowmobile club here in Ashland since I moved up here 25 years ago, and a very active member here. It's always interesting to see the different perspectives of people in those roles, both as a forester and a snowmobile club member. So enjoy doing that and just working outside and interacting with all those people who enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, so you have a very unique role where your professional career is working for a large landowner that allows public access in Maine, and they're a Canadian-based company.
Yes.
So for you, you have a kind of an understanding as to what both sides of the table are, and having the access, and working with the Maine Snowmobile Association. So from your perspective, how is that? How have we coexisted with that so far, and how do we continue that?
So I think a lot of it leading up to now has truly been on personal relationships between local clubs and local foresters. The companies that operate here in the state of Maine have always been very gracious to allow us that, and as have the small landowners. I mean, most of these recreational trails are on landowners from anywhere from a quarter of an acre up to our 1.3 million acres that we manage. A lot of that has been based on that relationship between clubs and private foresters like myself. Corporate policies, are different across companies and land ownerships, and the concerns that each landowner has is going to be different. Whether, again, you're small, large, two large landowners may have completely different concerns of recreational access on their property. We've got a long tradition of that here in the state of Maine. It's been awesome. As land ownership and land management changes hands, it's due to evolve. Nothing stays the same forever. Change is inevitable, so we'll have to work our way through that. And I think from the land management perspective, understanding the impact that recreation-based tourism has on our rural economy and the opportunity for large companies to be able to attract employees into an area and retain them here because of those recreational opportunities is something that is hard to make the connection, no different than it's hard to make the connection of, well, there's this large landowner, why would they care if we're riding snowmobile or ATV on our property? So I think to continue it and make it happen is work from both sides. From the club side, you've got to reach out, spend the time, take the effort to understand each individual landowner's needs and wants and concerns, so you can address those as you approach them. And from the landowner side is to think about what that access means to your local economy and the area that you're in. but that isn't the only reason that landowners allow it, right? Most of it is just historic use. And there's really nothing in it for a landowner. My own private property, there's a trail that goes across the back field. If I didn't care about outdoor recreation or snowmobiling or four-wheeling, or what it does for the town that I live in and the businesses and employees that it supports, if I was annoyed by it, the easy thing to do is say no. So I think there's a misconception that there's something in it for the landowner. For most people, there really isn't. For me, when I bought my property up here, I looked directly for recreational trail access. That's part of what led me to build my house where I did, is that recreational trail access. So for those landowners there, that's the win, is that they can get out onto that trail system. But for the majority of our landowners across the state, we're not riding on people's property who are also riding on their property and others. So it's understanding that from both perspectives, landowner and the club perspective, is how do you sustain that?
I always talk about that too, like when you talk about like multi-use, and there's some landowners that they may not snowmobile, but they allow a snowmobile trail because they like to walk it, they like to walk their dog. They realize that snowmobile club puts a lot of time and effort in. They clear a trail for them prior to the season. I think there are a lot of landowners out there that may not be specifically involved directly in those sports that still enjoy the access and enjoy seeing other people use their land, which is very unique. I mean, I don't know many other places that are like that. I know like some states, like it's probably a felony to go on someone else's land if you're caught there.
Yeah, we're very unique. Like, I don't think there's any place else like this that I've heard of that has so much public access to private property. It's something that we need to continue to, as associations like the Maine Snowmobile Association and ATV Maine, Maine Guides Association, all those associations need to continue to work with landowners to understand their evolving challenges and needs and concerns, so that we can hope to retain what we have today. Because backpedaling or the change of it could create a huge ripple. But at the same time, it's the landowner's right to allow or disallow what they feel is correct for them at that point, whether it be a family ownership and something changes in the family and they can't tolerate the noise or don't want the interaction of it, or a change in a local club where all of a sudden there's someone new that just doesn't quite know how to act and who to ask. So it's going to take work on everyone's part if we want to continue to retain our privilege of use of private property here in the state.
I always tell people too, like, I mean, if a landowner tells you that they want you to wear pink out on their property, a Pink Panther costume or anything like that, if that's the only way that they're going to allow you to ride a snowmobile, like, you better be wearing a Pink Panther costume.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
There's definitely, like, a landowner can tell you exactly what they're looking for. They have the right to do that. That's their land. So like you brought it up, like the Maine Snowmobile Association, like you're heavily involved in that. Like you said, what is the Maine Snowmobile Association for people that may not know what it's all about, and kind of give me a little bit of background on that.
All right, so we've the Maine Snowmobile Association has been in place since the 70s, since clubs really started getting organized and involved. We celebrated our 50th anniversary a few years ago. I can't think of the exact date off the top of my head, but and we really try to work through our member clubs and for our member clubs to promote the sport, promote safety, and understand and engage in landowner related concerns. We have a full-time lobbyist, James Cody, who has been with us for a little over a year now, and we've always had presence in Augusta to make sure that we've got our finger on the pulse of things that are happening legislatively, and also to push forward with legislation if we see a gap or a concern that isn't being addressed elsewhere. So really we're about supporting our clubs and making sure we're listening to them and taking what their concerns and needs are and working towards a goal, a common goal as a group. And public use of private property is one of those things that's the biggest pulse we keep our finger on. And then the second being funding, working closely hand in hand with the state off-road division, Department of Conservation through Joe Higgins' office, and making sure that we understand and he understands our club's needs. So a constant interaction with those folks. But really promotion of our clubs, promotion of our sport, and the safe use of private property.
What is the membership of Maine Snowmobile Association, and what if there is a club? Are they always members of Maine Snowmobile Association, or is that up to them whether they want to be?
So it's truly up to a club whether they want to be an MSA affiliated club or not. We have an application process, so when new clubs come along, they can apply to become an MSA club, and then they need to follow the documentation and membership process to collect membership dues, both for the association, the MSA, and their club, and then do a transmittal back and forth with our office. And through that, a club and their members would then be eligible to get the MSA paper. And as a member club, you have a number of directors, so MSA directors per the number of club members you have. So then you really get a seat at the table. So when issues are brought up, or you bring an issue up, and we have a directors meeting and things get voted on to action, you have a voice as a club. A club that's not an MSA affiliated club is typically more of a social club. They may have a grooming aspect and landowners. They may be associated and get grants through the state of Maine, but they truly aren't participating in making sure that their voice and the voice of their members is heard. The MSA as an association doesn't give out grants for trail maintenance. We don't collect money and give it back to clubs. It's the dues that are paid are to run our paper and to make sure that we have a presence and are supporting our clubs in Augusta.
So, I mean, MSA, like obviously, they probably don't work directly with landowners, but you guys are all club members and like have direct impact. But like, where if landowners want to reach out to MSA, like, can they be members or do they have to be a club member?
So a landowner would have to be a club member. You can't just be a member of the Maine Snowmobile Association. But if a landowner wants to be involved and engaged, then join your local club that's MSA affiliated. You'll become an MSA member. You can get the newspaper, so you can get that information back and forth. We have piles of members of clubs and the association who don't ride, who truly just want to support the sport and to stay engaged and involved with the snowmobiling community, which is great. In our local club here in Ashland, there's 7 to 10 people that sit around the table for every meeting, and I would say less than half of those ride. The rest of them are just have been invested in the sport for so long that they want to see it continue. They want to see it continue for their kids and grandkids. That's the reason I'm involved. I grew up in Canaan in a small club. My dad was a trail master there for over 25 years, and I got involved in that age and grew up through the club. And really it became my understanding that if you want to have a trail, you should spend time at it. And you should work on building signs and knocking on landowners' door and asking for permission, and just be a part of that organization so that it can continue. And now my purpose is, my son loves riding just as much as I do, and I want to see this continue for him. So if we want to see it continue, you got to work at it. If you're truly passionate about something, you've got to be involved and be part of the solution, rather than someone just sitting back saying this won't work or this will end soon. Just dig your fingers in and spend some time at it, because clubs need it, the association needs it, and our recreation-based community needs it.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and I was kind of thinking, like, I mean, obviously, like, it doesn't matter whether it's a snowmobile club, it doesn't matter whether it's the Elks Lodge or clubs like that are kind of, they seem to be the older generation. I mean, I go to the MSA banquet, and there's not a lot of younger generation getting involved, and I think, like you said, like, people need to realize that you don't have the trail systems, you don't have the landowner relations with those clubs if the younger generation doesn't get involved. Like, those trails just don't appear, like we were talking about earlier. you really got to work for it. And so how is MSA like trying to get new membership and get more people, the younger generation, involved?
So at this point in time, we're actively looking for a new executive director. Our executive director retired just prior to COVID. We went to 100% volunteer organization for a period of about a year. Our current full-time employee is our office manager, Liz, who sits at the desk in Augusta. And we've got a huge volunteer-based organization running today. Our executive board, all the vice presidents across the state, as well as the president and vice president of MSA, and then a steering committee. That's what's running us today. So we've been struggling to make strides forward, as most volunteer organizations are, just due to people. So our drive for a new executive director is truly to get us that next step. How are we engaging in people? How are we bringing people in and helping them understand the needs of our clubs from a statewide perspective? Local clubs are working hard at engaging new people and getting new members, whether it be through QR codes, social media reels while they're out grooming or doing trail work. And that's great. It drives membership up. But truly what clubs need are active members. Boots on the ground work. It's very expensive to do most all of what we do. Cutting brush isn't the guy going out with the clippers and doing his stretch behind his house for most trails. That still is a huge help. If you can grab a set of clippers and a chainsaw, call a club and spend a day, there's nothing that they would love more. And you see that. You see clubs make pleas on social media today, and people will come from all over and help out for a project. But we do struggle for members. The average age is growing, which isn't a good thing. Our club here in Ashland and the club just north of us in Portage seems to have a bit younger membership. The struggle then you run into is time commitments. Most of the people that are running clubs statewide today are your baby boomers. They've retired. They have some eligible free time. And then you also struggle then to bring in the working class, because those folks that are retired and have the opportunity to do trail work during the week, during the day, that's when they're going to do it. So to get your working class in on a weekend, if that other volunteer has already spent 40 hours doing trail work, they don't have a lot of interest in going out on Saturday and doing it when the working guy that's his day, right? But clubs are working away at it. If folks are interested, I strongly urge them to reach out to whatever volunteer organization you've got in your community, whether it be Snowmobile, ATV, or Joint Club, because they desperately need working members and younger members to get involved. And there's something that everyone can do. If you can run the club's Facebook page, you don't have to be able to run a groomer or a chainsaw. There's lots of things that clubs need volunteer hours for.
It's funny, like I've always wanted to run the groomer, but nobody will like let me do it. I don't know why, but I guess
right after this, Chris, we'll go hop in one.
We'll go work on that. But I do think, like, I mean, we go to the snowmobile shops and everything like that, and it's not the older generation that's always in there buying snowmobiles. It's a younger generation. I do think that there is a little bit of education on the younger generation's part, that they just don't realize that there's a lot of work that goes into this. Like, these trails just don't magically appear. They're not groomed at 8 o'clock in the morning by an elf that goes out there and has a little rake behind him. It's someone that's out there like giving their hard-earned time, going out and volunteering their time mostly. A lot of these aren't paid positions.
That's correct.
And it's very important, if this is going to continue, like you said earlier about working with landowners, but working with the clubs, because if the groomers are parked, there's no trails. If the trails aren't cleared in the fall or in the summertime, it's a huge deal. I mean, I know obviously in this area you were fortunate enough not to have a lot of the damage to the trails from the storms, but a lot of people came together during that. Like, there's definitely a huge influx of people that either volunteered their time, other businesses. I mean, the devastation that occurred in a lot of the trail systems in the state, it really is like pretty much a lot of stuff. Like, we wouldn't even be here talking today. I mean, we don't have the snow conditions that we normally do, but there wouldn't be a trail system if they hadn't all come together. Yeah,
it was quite amazing to see that both Western and Down East region come together. The Western region put together a meeting in Strong right after Christmas. got 90 people in the room and other people on Zoom, mapped out where the issues were so that clubs could then make sure that they were making town-to-town connections, just not working on spur trails, to pull that trail system together for the benefit of not just themselves to be able to go ride their sled on Saturday, but for the communities, and to make connections so that people could leave their community, ride through 6 or 8 more, have lunch out at an establishment, tip a waitress who needs a job, ride back through, grab gas at a gas station. It's truly that. And that's why most of these people you see out volunteering are doing it. It's for that. It's their understanding of what it contributes to their community and their love of the sport or seeing others enjoy it. And last year, if I remember the number right, it was just under 200,000 volunteer hours that were reported to the state. Most clubs, like our own here, like when I do our grant, I do not report 100% of our volunteer hours because I don't need all of them to maximize my grant dollars. Most clubs spend at least double what they report for volunteer hours getting the job done, because it's not only volunteer hours on the trail, it's volunteer hours at a hot dog roast, at some other sort of event where they're fundraising at their clubhouse, selling breakfast in order to pay for some of the other projects that they're doing. Statewide last year, clubs were only funded just north of 55% of their reported expenses. So there's a big gap in funding on the snowmobile trail side. So clubs work relentlessly to fill in that gap. If you figured out your home budget and needed to figure out a way to fill in 45% of it, it's a huge number. So clubs work relentlessly at that, and these volunteers aren't just doing the manual work. They're out knocking on doors, getting donations for an auction. They're out putting together fundraisers and spending hundreds of hours on that kind of stuff on an annual basis. So if you see an event like that going on in your community or an auction going on, don't be bashful to step up and put some money on the table there too. As clubs, we recognize that not everybody can be an active member. Not everybody can show up on a work day, but the financial contribution helps as well. That goes directly back to the trail.
And a lot of that, that's going back into, like you said, the trail system, but it's also helping the private landowner, because a lot of these, let's say large landowners, even small landowners, they may have bridges on theirs that were washed out in the storms. They went back and put these bridges in, and that's going to be probably been used for years, and they got washed out. So now they're going to go back in this spring, and that's going to already be done by the club that's actually put that in.
Yeah, for sure. There's huge benefits to having a trail system on your property. It's something that isn't talked about a lot, that probably could be a selling point for someone who wants to buy a piece of property or to retain one. Clubs work hard at it. These people are out, they understand the outdoors. There's requirements that even as a club, you're still required to meet all the legal requirements and the environmental requirements around water courses and things like that when you're doing bridge work or culverts. You got to have a DEP certified contractor when you're doing that kind of work. That's a requirement of the state of Maine grant process. So people out there know what they're doing. They want to make their landowners happy, and it can work both ways. Like you said, it's a way to make sure as a club that you're satisfying that landowner need. And if that landowner need is to have railing taller on a bridge than what you might put it for snowmobiling because they want to walk on it or they want their grandkids to be able to fish off it and not fall in, then the club can understand that and work through that. It's that conversation, that communication back and forth between club and landowner. And there's benefits there. You got to dig for them, but there's benefits there.
This is the Talking Trash segment, where we're going to talk about illegal dumping as one of the leading causes of private land being shut down for public access. On this episode of Talking Trash, we're going to go a little off track and talk about tracked ATVs on snowmobile trails. In recent months, we've received concerns from snowmobile clubs and landowners about the use of tracked ATVs on snowmobile trails. In Title 12, subsection 131.07, unlawfully operating a vehicle on a snowmobile trail, a person may not operate any four-wheel drive vehicle, dune buggy, all-terrain vehicle, motorcycle, or any other motor vehicle other than a snowmobile, unless that use has been authorized by the landowner or landowner's agent, or unless the use is necessitated by an emergency involving safety of persons or property. The exception to this law is that ATVs with tracks registered as a snowmobile can be operated on a snowmobile trail. With the exception in law, it is also important to remember that if you are operating an ATV with tracks that is legally registered as a snowmobile, that all snowmobile laws apply. This being said, a landowner can restrict the type of activity that is allowed on the trail. And if the landowner does not want track side-by-sides, please be respectful. As always, please ride right, ride responsibly, and respect private landowners that generously allow trail access. As William Stack said from Unsolved Mysteries, join me. Perhaps you may be able to solve a mystery. And I always look at it too, ATVs and snowmobile trails, some of them are restricted to what access you have, but sometimes it provides access for hunters, fishermen. It provides access for the bird hunters, the foragers. Everybody has kind of a buy-in if the land is open to access, which is a big deal.
Yeah, a lot of the landowners that we have recreation trails on throughout the state of Maine are open for multi-use, which is great, as long as folks are respectful. So it's understanding that as a user, just because there's a snowmobile trail sign up there doesn't mean you can hunt there without asking for permission. And it doesn't mean that you can ride your fat bike down the snowmobile trail. That snowmobile trail is permitted for that purpose. If it's a multi-sport trail, it's likely signed a multi-sport trail. If it's a multi-recreational trail, that would be open for everything from hiking, horseback riding, bicycling, and motorized. It's likely signed that way. If you're not sure, you have to take some responsibility as a land user to understand. And if you don't know what you should or shouldn't be doing there, you should probably back up and ask some questions. And if you don't know who the landowner is, it's up to you to ask that. Don't take it just because somebody has signed a snowmobile trail there that you can go and walk that with your dogs. The landowner may not be open to that at all. And every landowner has their own wants and needs of that trail. The club isn't necessarily going to go take their snowmobile club sign down because the snowmobile season's over. So just because you see that sign doesn't mean it's open for all sorts of recreation.
And that's kind of a good segue into the off-trail riding stuff, like you were talking about signage and MSA lobbying for laws that would help protect landowners and stuff. And this past year, MSA really kind of spearheaded that closed off-trail riding bill that kind of came into play. And kind of talk about the impact with that and some of the things that you've seen, maybe specifically with what you do for work and with some of the landowners that you've heard from about the off-trail riding.
So we've been working away at trying to figure out how to put some teeth to corralling folks into the correct location without inhibiting them from some of the traditional use. It's easy to say no off-trail riding everywhere. New Hampshire has done that. But folks shed hunt, they trap, they go to their camp. A lot of that is on unplowed woods roads or woods trails, depending on the size of your ownership and your location in the state of Maine. And most landowners are all right with that, unless they're doing something there which would create a safety hazard because someone was within their operation, whether it be for maple syrup, logging, recreating at their camp and sliding down a hill, whatever it may be. So this law was fairly pinpointed to prohibit folks where the new signs are up. So they're a red sign that looks completely different than every other sign that a snowmobile or ATV club is going to put out, that just simply say no off-trail riding. And the signs got to be posted at both ends of the property, very conspicuous. So it should be very clear to the rider where they're not allowed. In some instances, clubs have permission to use a section of someone's backyard or a section of their forest road, and that's the only place that landowner wants them. That's really what this law is tailored to, is to corral those people to stay on that groomed corridor where the landowner has been very clear with the club that that is the only place they want them. So if you're riding through a big field and you don't see those signs, it doesn't mean you should go do whatever you want wherever you want. It just means that likely that landowner hasn't come to the point yet that they said that's the only place. When you get up into the woods roads, you're less likely to see a lot of these signs unless there's something of high value that the landowner definitely wants you out of. For our case, it would be our planted stands. We spend millions and millions of dollars a year culturing and growing our forest crop. And that can be anywhere from high quality, high value hardwoods to our planted spruce seedlings. And we don't want people out there running them over. It's really that simple. Most people don't want someone in their front yard driving over their shrubs or through their flower bed. Our forest is the backbone of our business. The forest is the base and the foundation of our multi-level business all the way up to tissue making. So without that forest crop, it impedes the rest of our business program. Other landowners are the same way. And it really doesn't matter what it is or why they don't want you there. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not hurting anything. Well, do you know that? If you don't know what's underneath that snow, this year it's pretty obvious because there's 6 to 8 inches pretty much statewide that there's a whole lot of stuff underneath that snow. A typical late February, there'd be 3 to 6 feet of snow covering. Well, if you're out there turning around, you don't know that there's trees planted underneath there that are 3 feet tall, and you just drove over one because you were stuck, because you turned around somewhere you didn't know where you were, and you're damaging someone's crop. From the large landowner perspective, I try to think of our forest as most people's flower garden or vegetable garden. We've spent time culturing and growing that forest. We pay taxes on that property, and the landowner is very passionate about the quality of forest products that we're creating from our woodlands, and we don't want somebody out there recklessly damaging it. Now, you're always going to have the guy fell off the edge of the trail and got stuck. Well, that's fine. But when you see track after track running through something that you've spent years getting to grow and millions of dollars of research and investment getting those individual trees to that point, it's very disheartening. And for most landowners, that's enough to make them say no. So as landowners, they all struggle with that, is where's your tipping point, right? What's the saturation level of disapproval that you get to before you say no? Because no is the easy answer. It's free, right? There's nobody going to bother you or consume the landowner's time asking questions of, can I go here? You're logging there. Where can I move the trail? The no answer is the free answer for a landowner. So people out there recreating need to think about that, as well as clubs do. If you see somebody off trail and you don't have signs up and you think that might hit the tipping point for that landowner if they see it, you should get out and put signs up and let the landowner know you're doing it. As a club member, you owe that to your landowners that you're out there on.
I mean, you have a unique situation too, because you're a brand representative.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, I mean, these brands, these companies, you don't see the mom and pop on the snowmobile trails anymore riding. Mm-hmm. They advertise that kind of off-trail riding is big. It's really big out west, and it's kind of moved this way. And like you said, New Hampshire, that's not allowed. I mean, by no means, I don't think everywhere is like, I guess, closed to off-trail riding. That's not the way it is. Yeah. I mean, this kind of narrows their focus into areas where they just are prohibited. They're not allowed to be. But that doesn't mean that landowners totally don't want them to ride off-trail.
That's correct. And it's difficult to dance that line. When the MSA worked with the Warden Service and landowners on the wording on this bill, it's not really applicable if someone never touches a trail, right? You unload at your camp up in the woods, whether it's a small patch of 100 acres that you own a camp and it's on 2 acres of, and it's a 100-acre landowner around you, or whether you're out in the North Maine woods at your lease camp and unload. It doesn't mean that you can't ride there. Personally, that was the impetus for me of working on this bill to get it written the way it is, so that we can corral people away from the places that they for sure don't want to be. But it doesn't work for everywhere. It's not a no trespassing sign for the state of Maine outside the trail corridor. So we still have put a lot of responsibility back on the snowmobiler to be smart about where they're riding, where it's not marked that way. So the responsibility is back on the user. If you want to see continued use of being able to ride unplowed logging roads, to get to your camp, to go shed hunting, to connect point A to point B, it's that, I guess I would call that backcountry riding as opposed to tree riding out in the trees, running over people's crops, and they're two different things. That backcountry riding, most landowners don't have a large concern about that. You're on the road footprint that they allow vehicular access in the summer. So there's not a large danger from a damage perspective there, or a liability from the perspective of your machine burns out in the middle of the woods where you aren't on a road. How are you getting that garbage off their property? Those are the kinds of things that landowners get concerned about when people are riding off that road footprint.
So while we're on a hot topic, one of the most recent ones that's come up is side-by-sides with tracks that are registered as snowmobiles. So one of the things that, obviously from our perspective, we've discussed, you and I have, about these track machines, and they're actually registered as snowmobiles. There's no law that prohibits them.
Yeah.
But I've been seeing some of the clubs posting that they don't want them there because, we talked about, the landowner didn't want them there, requesting them, which is a little bit difficult because it is a snowmobile by definition.
Yeah.
Where do you see that going now?
So, definitely is a safety concern. You've got trails that are range from 4 feet wide to 20 feet wide across the state. Our state definition of a snowmobile is a track propelled by tracks. So that track side by side meets that definition. We don't have a width requirement or a height or anything like that. So legally they're allowed. I guess the way I see the clubs that have said that their landowners say they don't want them allowed would be very similar to the ATV side, where people don't want dirt bikes. A dirt bike is a registered all-terrain vehicle by definition, and some landowners do not want them on their property. So I think those are two parallels that I've seen come to pass in the past week or so, that probably need to be addressed. And from a public perception standpoint and a communication standpoint to those tracked side-by-side users, understanding the rest of the snowmobile community's concern about the safety of them on trails, and especially in specific areas. I think you're going to see more of those in your lakeside communities where people own a camp and they're ice fishing and they may run to town 2 or 3 times a year. But some of those are around trails that are only 4 to 6 to 8 feet wide. And that side-by-side takes up 6 of that 8 feet. There's no room to meet a snowmobile in a bad place. They're not as well lit up as a groomer may be, because people are using groomers that take up 100% of the trail footprint. But a groomer tends to be out from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., be lit up more than a Christmas tree, and very obvious and going very slow. I met side-by-side just outside of Medway on Saturday. Very respectful. The side-by-side pulled right over in a very good spot. The place we were riding was 10 to 12 feet wide, so it wasn't a safety concern. But further down that same trail system, had we met him in a hairpin corner where it was only 8 feet wide, and both of us had been riding not quite right, it could have been a safety issue. So it's something that definitely we need to get the word out about as a snowmobile community, to make sure that people who are using those understand the concern of the others. There's just under 700 of them registered last year in the state of Maine of the 90,000 registered snowmobiles. So it is a small percentage, but like anything, it doesn't take a large percentage to create an issue and concern. So we can't hide it. We can't hide behind the fact that there's only 700 of 90,000. We definitely need to address it and be thinking about it as we move forward.
They're definitely becoming more popular. Like you said, we see them more around those lakeside communities where they can kind of go into town, drop down on the lake and go ice fishing for the day and take the family out there. It's like a portable ice shack of some sort. And, they're so slow speed really, that they're not really made for snowmobiling hundreds of miles by any means. Like you just couldn't physically do it. I don't know. My back would probably hurt by the end of the day if I was in there. But it's interesting because like you kind of talked about the trail safety concerns and some of the things you brought up last year about operating snowmobiles around logging operations. Like, do you want to go in kind of just where you're kind of both sides where you work for the timber forest company? Like, what is like the etiquette behind like working around logging operations, like the plowed roads, and high speeds and like failing to stop at stop signs?
For sure. So over time, snowmobiles get faster. People riding them have become, I'd say, less aware of the trails and the landowner commitment. You know, decades ago, if you were snowmobiling, you were likely part of a club and you were raised on a snowmobile and in clubs. Today, people get into it in their midlife, 30s to 50s, and they start at that point and they don't have that connection with all of how that trail comes about. And trail safety and etiquette isn't taught. You can register your snowmobile, go buy one, register it, and get on the trail with no training course, no video to watch, anything. So you're up to your own devices to learn how to do it right. Hopefully you've got some good mentors around you that are showing you the correct way. But if a landowner is gracious enough to allow you and allow the trail there, be respectful of that. If a sign says slow down, slow down. Whether it be in town because there's kids out playing in the yard, or whether it be around an active logging operation. On active logging operations, the club should have them signed to the nines. They should say caution logging, caution plowed road, slow down. If you're coming up onto a piece of logging equipment, make eye contact with the operator, make sure they know you're there and wait till they let you by. Heard countless stories of people just zooming by logging equipment. You have the opportunity as a rider to ruin that person's career. They're working that day. If something happens to you as a result of their work because you didn't take the time to pause for a minute to let them finish their job because you were too anxious to get along your way, they're going to have to live with that as much as you and your family may have to. We had 2 incidents right here close to home last year. One of them where a gentleman failed to stop at a stop sign on a plowed logging road and was killed. That driver, every time he gets in his truck, I'm sure thinks about that. And the family and the gentleman's friend that was with them, I'm sure thinks about that as they ride their sled today, if they still do. The signs are out there for a reason. Just be aware of them. Don't overdrive your ability. Don't try to keep up with your buddies. The signage is there. Follow it. Be aware of that. Be aware there's someone coming around the corner that may not be riding as correct as you. Ride defensively, no different than you drive your car. There's every type of a person out there operating a snowmobile today, from the person who got on it 7 minutes ago at a rental agency that went through the checklist that just started riding, to the person who's been at it since they were 7 and now they're 70. They are all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have lapses in judgment, but you have the opportunity as you're out there riding your recreational vehicle to have an impact on those around you. If you see somebody doing something not right, stop and tell them. Don't be so bashful, because you could save that person's life or somebody else that they're going to interact with. So it's vitally important to do that around logging operations, specifically plowed roads. Ride to the right and ride slow. You're going to meet something that well exceeds your size. You have way better ability to control your vehicle than they do theirs, and they're working. You're having fun. They're out there doing their job. They're showed up to do their job every day. Most people don't have that type of interaction at their job. The person working retail somewhere doesn't have some recreationalist coming in and jamming up their day. So give those people out there working in the woods the same respect when you're out there recreating.
I think the big thing too is like you're leaving a lasting impression, and if you leave a bad one, they're always going to remember that. They don't remember the good interactions. Like they think about that, and just be courteous out there. I mean, these guys are out there. You're on vacation most of the time, or have a day off. Like these guys are out there working. This is a working forest. Just be respectful of them and kind of move on.
100%. And that, logging operations or the guy snowshoeing on his own property on the snowmobile trail, you come up behind somebody doing something on the trail, they're there for a reason. It might be the landowner. And if you are rude or objectionable to them, you may be the reason that the club is looking for a reroute, or that someone's looking for another trail next year or that day. So be aware of that. Be thoughtful. 90,000 snowmobiles registered in the state of Maine. Somewhere less than 15,000 of those people are club and MSA members. So a lot of people don't have that connection to that signed land ownership permission form that the club member has. Those other 75,000 people or so don't think about that. So we've got to create a way for them to get that in their head of how and why do we have these trails here, and what do we need to do to make sure that I can ride it again tomorrow.
And if you can hear it in the background, the logging industry is alive and well in Ashland, Maine.
Very well.
You can hear the trucks driving by, and it's the logging industry is a big deal up here, and it happens on all these landowners that allow these access, whether it's a trail system, hunting, any outdoor recreation. Just to wrap it up, Matt, I just want to thank you for everything that you do from Maine Snowmobile Association, for Revving, and for Polaris, representing those brands very well. And anything that you want to say before we go out here, and how can people reach out to MSA and kind of help along the way and help the snowmobile industry? Yeah,
so you can get right on our website, mainesnowmobileassociation.com. And from there, you can see all of our clubs listed down through there with a mailing address. We also this year have a form stack link on there, so you can join as many clubs as you want to all at once and pay through one portal rather than trying to reach out to 13 or 14 different clubs. You can pick the locations you ride and join those clubs right from our website. That's really the best way for one-stop shopping. I'd say 70 to 90% of clubs today have a Facebook page and or a website. So that's a great way, if you're on social media, to reach out and connect. If not, stop at your town office. If you're from out of state or from completely on the other side of the country, hit up our website, call our office in Augusta at the Maine Snowmobile Association, and we will connect you with someone to answer your questions, because that's what we're all about, promoting the sport and making sure that people understand that we want to keep this going.
It all helps. Go out and support a landowner today, and support your local club, and we'll continue this for future generations.
Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thanks for listening and learning more about the impact MSA and snowmobile clubs have on outdoor recreation. I hope you'll consider getting more involved in these recreational opportunities and help preserve this unique sport for the future generations to come. Join me next week to hear from Ben Carlisle, the president of one of Maine's forest management companies, Prentice & Carlisle. We'll learn more about what it means to own and actively manage Maine's expansive forests. In the meantime, do your part to help protect Maine's tradition of access to private land by being a responsible land user and showing your appreciation and support for Maine's private landowners.